Okay, so the next thing is introductions. Um, and it's a very similar idea to reintroductions, except we're introducing a population to an area outside of its native range. And so I mentioned a couple of examples why you would introduce a species outside of its historic range. Um, and so the most common reasons are climate change and that the current range is unsuitable. In the United States, we haven't started doing introductions for climate change, but the idea here is that we might want to move species before their populations get too small if we don't think they can move themselves. Um, so, things like what I study, amphibians, they can't move very far each generation. Some of them are expanding their ranges, but some of them are probably not going to do that. Some other examples might be some small mammals. If there's significant barriers to moving for climate change, like maybe there is a giant highway or a whole city. There have been studies showing that Atlanta is going to be a huge barrier for biodiversity moving with climate change. And so perhaps there are some species that we know are going to need to be north of Atlanta that are currently south of Atlanta. Maybe we need to just move them over past Atlanta so that they can move on their own after that. Another big reason is the current range is unsuitable. We do have a lot of additional concerns with introductions in that because the species did not historically occur there, we need to think about whether the species could have negative implications for other species in this area. So we don't want it to harm the native ecosystem or create a new endangered species to have to deal with. So an important example is the kakapo. This is a flightless parrot that is native to New Zealand. And it historically lived on the mainland. So you can see this picture here. The dark green is where kakapos used to live. And if you know anything about New Zealand, you know there are a lot of invasive species. It's an island. Islands have big problems with invasive species. And there's a large number of introduced predators like cats. There are rats which eat their eggs, all kinds of problems. And so kakapos have not been doing well on the mainland. So what they've done is they've moved them to some of the smaller islands off the coast of New Zealand where they never lived before. But they're predator free. It's much easier to exterminate invasive species on small islands. And some of these small islands have never had some of these invasive species. So you can see here, they introduced them to this little tiny island, the Little Barrier Island, Hauturu, to Mode Island, and to Codfish Island down here. And these are predator-free places, and the kakapos are doing pretty well, as far as I know, on these islands. The next thing I want to talk about is called headstarting. This is where you take young from the wild, you captive rear them for part of their lives, and then release them to help boost juvenile survival. The idea is that if the juveniles have a very low survival rate, if we take them in to an aquarium or a zoo or something like that, and we give them plenty of food and protect them from predators for a while, and then we release them again, then we could increase recruitment quickly to help the population recover more quickly. This can work well for species where juvenile survival is very low. One example, there's a frog that lays like 10,000 eggs. The dusky gopher frog, it historically lived kind of on the toe of the boot of Louisiana, but right now it only lives in one place in Mississippi. It's probably the most endangered amphibian in the United States. And it lays 10,000 eggs at a time for each female. But the juvenile survival is extremely low. Their ponds can dry up and they can have no tadpoles make it to metamorphosis out of the pond. And so they will take some of the eggs and put them into tanks and raise them up in order to boost the number of juveniles that make it into the habitat. And that has been working very well, and it has basically kept them from going extinct. Another good example is sea turtles, and sea turtles is one that you'll see they do this all the time for. And every species of sea turtle is endangered or threatened, so this can be very important for helping them. But basically, sea turtle juveniles have really, really high mortality. Lots of things like to eat them. Lots of things like to raid the nest, like crows and raccoons. And so what they do is they take sea turtle hatchlings. Sometimes they'll take the eggs. They'll guard the eggs as a way of kind of head starting. And they'll often also take sea turtle hatchlings that appear weak or disoriented, kind of feed them up, get them a little bit stronger, and then release them to help boost the population. Another concept that can be used in head starting is surrogacy. So you'll have heard of surrogate parents for people, often where a fertilized egg is implanted into a woman and she carries it to term at pregnancy for another couple. In this case, surrogacy means that they use other parents, not the biological parents, to rear young that need help. And so next you'll watch a video that involves head starting and surrogacy for sea otters. So make sure you watch that because baby sea otters are really cute.